All right, today we're digging into a pretty complex and fascinating piece of analysis called the global control grid. It makes a pretty bold claim about the system that's been shaping global events for a very long time. And it starts with a huge question right off the bat. After more than 70 years, is the global power structure we've all grown up with actually collapsing? And according to the analysis we're looking at today, the answer is yes. It argues that the very pillars of this post-World War II system are under serious, measurable stress. So, what we're going to do is break down that argument piece by piece and look at the evidence it's based on. Okay, but before we can even talk about a system collapsing, we first have to ask, what is the system? This analysis presents it as a structure built on what it calls 4 key pillars of control. And here they are: a financial architecture, global intelligence reach, media narrative control, and a system of shadow financing. Now, the really important thing to grasp here, according to the analysis, is that these aren't just 4 separate things. They're all designed to work together, to reinforce each other. So let's take Pillar 1, the financial architecture. To understand this, you gotta go all the way back to 1944, to the Bretton Woods Conference. That's what set up the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And that status, well, it gives you enormous structural power, enforced through institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. Next, we've got Pillar 2, intelligence reach. The analysis points directly to the creation of the CIA back in 1947. And it cites declassified documents to show how the agency was authorized to influence foreign governments. You know, actions that internal documents apparently just call regime change. Then there's Pillar 3, media narrative control. The argument here is that there's a documented history of coordination between government and media, stretching from old school stuff like Operation Mockingbird right up to what it claims is coordination with modern social media platforms. And that brings us to the 4th and final pillar: shadow financing. Now, this was about using illicit money, and the analysis gets specific, citing things like drug trafficking, to fund covert ops. And here's the kicker: it all happens off the books, totally outside of public view or any kind of congressional oversight. Okay, so that's the 4-pillar framework they lay out. But, you know, a framework is just a theory without evidence, right? So let's get into the primary sources the analysis actually points to. This timeline really helps anchor the whole thing in history. You can literally see the building blocks being put in place. First, Bretton Woods in '44, that's the financial pillar. Then, just a few years later, the National Security Act creates the CIA. Boom, there's your intelligence pillar. And then, later on, you see these moments of exposure, like the Church Committee and the Kerry Brown report, which really blew the lid off a massive shadow finance scandal. This is a really interesting example of what the analysis calls narrative control. It's all about the language. Look at the difference here. Publicly, an operation is called promoting democracy, but internally, the term they allegedly use is way more blunt: regime change. And to back up that intelligence reach pillar, the analysis doesn't just theorize. It points to a long paper trail of declassified covert actions. We're talking documented operations in Iran, Guatemala, Chile, Nicaragua. The list goes on. And when it comes to shadow financing, they pull out this just incredibly damning quote from Senator John Kerry himself. He was describing this bank, BCCI, and look what he said: a bank that was a fully integrated money laundering operation. Wow. And this is so important. The claims about shadow financing aren't just pulled out of thin air. The analysis ties them directly to official government reports. You've got the Walsh report on Iran-Contra, the Kerry Brown report on BCCI, and even a report from the CIA's own Inspector General in '98 looking into the Contra cocaine connection. Okay, so we've laid out the 4 pillars. We've looked at the historical evidence presented for them. Now we get to the real heart of the argument, the claim that this whole structure is shifting, right now, under very specific, documented pressures. Let's look at that financial pillar first. To understand what's happening now, we need a baseline. So check out this number. Back in 2001, according to IMF data, the US dollar made up a whopping 73% of all global currency reserves. Just total dominance. Okay, now let's jump forward to 2023. Look at this chart. That number has fallen all the way down to 58%. That is a huge drop. And the analysis presents this as Exhibit A, hard data showing a massive structural shift happening in the world's financial system. And this isn't just happening by accident. The analysis makes a point to show that this is an active process. You have the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and they are actively and openly building their own payment systems. And their stated goal? To create a way to do business that completely bypasses the US dollar. So this table really pulls it all together and summarizes the core argument. Each pillar is facing its own specific stressor. For the financial architecture, it's that declining dollar share we just saw. For intelligence reach, it's decades of exposed actions damaging its credibility. For media control, it's the rise of decentralized platforms that break up a single narrative. And for shadow financing, new transparency rules are making it harder to operate in the shadows. The key takeaway here is that according to this analysis, all four pillars are shaking at the same time. So let's be really clear about the conclusion here. The analysis isn't trying to put a date on a calendar and say this is when it all falls apart. The argument is more subtle. It's that the fundamental conditions, the very bedrock that kept this system stable for 70 plus years, are now changing in ways we can actually measure.
And that leaves us right where the analysis ends, with a huge question. If the structure really is shifting, what on earth comes next?